It wasn't until about 8 years later that Governor Bradford wrote that they had a chance to almost catch their breath and taste the sweetness of the land. It was scratching. Every day wasn't clear what the meals were going to be. It was a very, very difficult time. But through this very difficult and trying time, this group of people came together on a vision to build a new civilization. And what was it now, if we start to add all these things up? What was it that the Pilgrims gave us? Well, first it was this first of the northern colonies up in Massachusetts. Second of all, they gave us the Mayflower Compact, which was America's first constitution and based on the same principles that would later become the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and other state constitutions as well. They did separate their church and civil governments. They never thought that there was any idea of separating God from any government. If you take a look at Bradford's writing, he was the governor. He is declaring a Christian day of thanksgiving to give thanks to God, and led people, and encouraged people in trying to run a Christian civil government. But he also had Brewster, who ran the church, a different person, and the church had a different function than the civil government. So they separated church and civil governments, never thinking to take God out of any government. They also had a vision for a Christian civilization. And when you take a look at the things that they gave us, first of all, the idea of the written Constitution, a group of free people under God covenanting together, that was quite a development. That was the equivalent of Einstein to the science of civil government. But they also separated church and state. We take that for granted today as well, but when you think about the Muslim countries, they don't tend to separate their civil from their church governments. This was a very important technology for America, and to bring a lot of peace and harmony to America by this idea of separating civil and church governments. And then there was the rejection of socialism. Governor Bradford knew his Bible well enough to know that socialism was in violation of God's law. God's law says, "Thou shalt not steal." It allows for the ownership of private property, and it never gives a government the right to take something that belongs rightfully to one person and redistribute it to someone else. Governor Bradford understood that far better than the pastors of our churches in America do today. And so they rejected socialism, and of course they gave us this wonderful tradition of Thanksgiving. You perhaps may be wondering, you say, "My goodness, Congressman Akin, you're making a long story of getting around to Thanksgiving." Well, that was a wonderful Thanksgiving, tremendous food, 3 days of celebration and giving thanks to God. Thanksgiving became a very popular holiday among different colonies up and down the seaboard, but the first national day of Thanksgiving was declared in 1789 by George Washington to thank God for the fact that the new U.S. Constitution had just been ratified. And so the ratification of the Constitution was the event for the first national day of Thanksgiving. And later on, under Abraham Lincoln, he declared in the middle of the Civil War, in 1863, he declared that there should be a yearly national day of Thanksgiving. There was some moving around of when the date would be, and finally was settled in November on the fourth Thursday. And so we see that the Pilgrims gave us this beautiful celebration of Thanksgiving, but so much more, particularly the idea of our Constitution, the separation of civil and church governments, the rejection of socialism, and particularly the vision for civilization so much different than where they had come from. Quite a work of accomplishment. Were the Pilgrims proud of what they did? Not. Actually, they had a very hard time. The contracts that they were part of, for the next 25 years, they were paying way more than was fair. The merchant loan sharks in London charged them a tremendous amount of money. In fact, they paid £20,000 after having borrowed 1,800. So it was more than a 10 times ratio, sometimes interest rates at 30 and 40%. And so they were really taken advantage of. And as they were older and the Puritan culture had come in and settled Boston, the seaboard was getting more and more ships coming across, they might have wondered, did we really accomplish anything so much? And yet, Governor Bradford, looking back, must have seen into the future when he wrote, Thus out of small beginnings greater things have grown by his hand, who made all things out of nothing, and gives being to all things that are. And as one small candle may light 1,000, so the light enkindled here is shown to many, yea, in a sense, to our whole nation. Let the glorious name of Jehovah have all the praise. And so it was that though they didn't feel very important, this little small band of water-tossed saints of God, men, women, and children, daring to come across this vast ocean, landing on the stern and rocky shoreline of Massachusetts in wintertime, carving out an existence, barely snatched from starvation by Tishquanto, their Indian friend, always looking to God, were able to carve out a civilization which laid the foundations for a nation yet to come. And so we have the great adventure story, a great adventure story in terms of just the sacrifice, the vision that's involved, and particularly the trajectory of the great ideas that they established were to be the foundation and the pinning for our nation. So as we celebrate Thanksgiving, my American friends, we have a lot to be thankful for, not just for some good food and turkey, not just to remember the terrible sacrifices of those who've come before, but also to remember how it was that as they used their Bibles, they built a civilization unlike anything the world had ever seen before. God bless you all. Enjoy a fantastic Thanksgiving.